is Andrew Burchill, and we're going to be talking about birds in the Great Lakes. So, a bit about myself. I'm an ecologist at Arizona State University. I love talking with my hands, which you probably can't see right now, but I also love data, I love doing field work, and I really like talking about this stuff to other people. As for career aspirations, I hope to be a government scientist if possible, and it would be really cool if I could work with a land management agency as well. So we'll just jump straight into it. Birds love the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes is like spring break for these birds. It's one of the big hotspots for breeding migratory birds. Birds like this veery over here come from as far away as southern Brazil, but we also have tons of birds from Mexico, Central America, South America. They all end up in the Great Lakes region when they migrate here. However, you probably also know recent research has shown that bird populations are just being decimated in North America. Since like 1970, the bird population has gone down by like 30%. So that's horrifying, and it's probably important that we understand what's going on. So luckily, in June, dedicated volunteers like here will walk trails like you can see on Isle Royale here, and they just listen to birds. So they can hear the bird song, they can identify it to the species, and they can count how many there are and what they're doing. And a lot of parks have been doing this breeding bird survey for many years. Like Isle Royale has been doing it for 25. And even better though, in 2000, the Great Lakes Monitoring Network was established. It's an inventory and monitoring network, and so like a bunch of parks in this region are now all doing the same thing and on the same page. They're all recording since 2011, but some have been recording since like 1982. And so we're just going to go through those parks really quick so you know what I'm talking about. So first of all, Isle Royale. It's the best park, enough said. We got Apostle Island, we have Grand Portage, there's the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, we have Pictured Rocks, St. Croix, Sleeping Bear Dunes, Voyageurs, and then not Indiana Dunes. We're not talking about Indiana Dunes because they collect data differently, so we're just going to pretend they don't exist for right now. I mean, they're cool, but whatever. So my question is, how are these bird communities in the Great Lakes region changing over time, and how do they differ between parks? But before we answer that, we have to say, why are any species found anywhere? And it's a little bit basic, but we know that the environment, what's going on in the environment, interacts with the traits that the species have. It's like species niches. So for example, if there are a bunch of moose eating all the shrubs, you might expect to find fewer shrub nesting birds there. Hint hint, this is my other part of the project where I study this with moose and Isle Royale, but we don't have time for that. So essentially what I did was I got the bird information where you can find all the birds based on these monitoring networks. I got environmental data, and I got all these bird traits. I got them from the Greater Lakes Monitoring Network, I got them from published research papers, and I got them from park surveys. And then I got all this data and I put it together with this modeling approach called Hierarchical Modeling of Species Communities, or just HMSC. It's this kind of newfangled thing that we don't need to get into, but it's very cool. So this is what I found. I found a lot of things, but we're just going to talk about a few kind of interesting examples and just talk about the differences between parks that I found right now. So on this x-axis, we're going to see a bunch of different parks, and then on the y-axis, it's just a proportion of birds in the park that are migratory species. And so, interestingly, during the breeding bird survey, almost all the birds they see are migratory, but Mississippi has the fewest, probably because it's kind of in an urban area and along a river where there's a lot of native birds that don't migrate. We can do this again too with any sort of bird trait. In this case, let's just look at how many wetland breeding birds are in a park. And maybe not surprisingly, Sleeping Bear Dunes comes out ahead for the most wetland breeding birds. I mean, it's just a little strip on a big lake, so that kind of makes sense. But we can also, perhaps more interestingly, compare over time too, because we are getting these really long data sets. So we're just going to look at the species richness, like how many species do you expect to find in an area over time. And for example, St. Croix is just going up. That's great. But we also have parks like Voyageur where it's actually decreasing over time. And some parks, of course, just have high species richness for the whole time, and others like Isle Royale just don't have a ton of different species at any given time. We can also look at just individual species, any different species, and I realize now that I have only included one bird picture in this entire talk, so I think in the ornithological community this will get you shot. So here's another picture of that veery again. We can look at its population, or not its population, but how likely it's to be found in these parks. And you can see that, like, oh, in St. Croix there's a lot more veeries than in Voyageur, and we can see how that changes through time. Now, so this is going to be the most confusing one, but we can also ask even more kind of important questions, like, are the parks reflective of what's going on in North America? So if a bird species is in decline generally in North America, could it maybe be doing better in a park because it's a wilderness zone? So you're going to see a line that looks like it's going up, which is, you think that would be really positive, but in this case it actually means no. The parks are kind of reflecting these continent level changes. So as the species that are doing well and have high growth rates for the last 25 years, as time goes on, you find more and more of them and fewer of these species that are declining, which sucks, but it is what we've found so far across the continent. So I just want to say that I didn't even include any really environmental variables in what I've talked about right now. I do in my moose project, but really HMSC could be a great tool for park management, especially because you can throw in as much remote sensing data as you want, and it can do predictions based on hypothetical scenarios. So what happens if climate change is there? What happens if the moose population explodes? What happens if we cut down this forest? I also want to thank these amazing scientists that worked with me, Lynette Putvin and Jared Wolf, who's at Michigan Tech University. They were so helpful, and the ESA staff. Jessica Johnson is amazing, also Chelsea Bidding. I want to thank all of them, and yeah, it was a great experience. I wish I had time to talk about my moose stuff, but I don't. So, thank you so much.